From Jesus Christ the Savior and the Webster Report.
If you want to control a society, you do not start with the courthouse. You start with the home, because the family is the first government a child knows. Father, mother, order, discipline, provision, correction, teaching, love. That is why the destruction of the family is not random. It is foundational warfare. Because if the government can replace the father, replace the mother, feed the house, educate the child, define morality, reward dependency, and keep adults so exhausted they barely have time to lead their own families, then the state becomes more than government. It becomes parent, provider, teacher, priest, and master. That is the trap. Welfare can become dependence. Education can become formation. Economics can become bondage. Work can become exhaustion. And while parents are fighting just to stay afloat, the system gets the child for hours a day, year after year, teaching them what to believe, what to call good, what to call evil, and where authority comes from. This does not mean every teacher is evil. It does not mean every person receiving help is wicked. The issue is the system.
Well, I think that's enough of those tech issues. Hello, good evening, and welcome to another Webster Report, limping into the broadcast as per usual. I'll try and get that video working, Alex, but what have you got for me, mate? It's been an hell of a week. What do you reckon?
Am I on mute? Hello? Am I on mute?
I can hear you.
Great. Yeah, well, basically that was interesting introductory video. Very clear, very useful. I think sometimes with reels, they hit the mark maybe 40%, but that's a 90% of that one. And it does. It talks about stuff that you can find in the social construction of reality, which was where those ideas originated in the late 60s by a guy called Peter Berger and Thomas Luckman, two of them. And it talks about eternity as an institution, and it's interesting how the government will take over those roles and institutionalize us, and that's what's been happening a lot of the time. So that was a really good point. And then there was one little thing that got said, which I found interesting, which was it talks about, we get into something called formation instead of education. And that's interesting because I'm not sure if this is from a Christian perspective or just a truth perspective that he was speaking. He didn't explicitly mention Christian faith. But interesting, it would align with Christian faith. Except when we talk about education as being preferable to formation, that's a highly problematic statement for me. Some forms of formation, like reaction formation, that Matthias Desmet talks about when he wrote about COVID. He was a professor in Belgium, and he wrote about this. Some forms of formation are conditioning. They're based on behaviorism. That type of formation is profoundly unhealthy. And education would be far superior. But if you remember, Tony Blair said education, by which he actually meant formation in the sense of defining people in terms of what they believed, reproducing, if you like, replicas of an idealized person that would become the model citizen. That's what is usually meant by when somebody like Blair says education, it really is the reality of what formation is. But from a Christian ecological point of view, and I would say actually one that started in Judaism, which I've been talking about a lot recently, formation is good if you are formed through Torah, in the case of the Jewish position, of wisdom traditions. It's basically living, eating, breathing, sleeping the ecology of God as recorded through scriptures and traditions that regulate how we should live in communities, which comes back to family connected under an umbrella notion of the kingdom of God. How should individual family units, extended families, nuclear families, whatever sociological model you have, how should they work together healthily within a model of the kingdom? That is a formation ecology. So when formation talks about something that's truly ecological, still involves free will and isn't just about conditioning and does involve choice, then formation is actually better than education. Education, at its best, trains the mind only, which is good to a degree. To have good critical and thinking tools is a good thing. To have mundane knowledge about the world cannot be a bad thing. But if you run off in the wrong direction with those important tools, then your education isn't going to do you much good. A bit like if you just do theoretical stuff but can't build a house, or let's just say the poor, it's the fun. Everyone wants to become a survivalist, and you can't make a shelter for yourself and fish or whatever. Then your education is going to be pretty much tokenistic. So, but apart from that, I thought it was a really good introduction. But it does I think it does lead to that question of what are we trying to achieve in the world, in society, because so much that is happening in the world today is polarized along lines of identity and choosing a tribe, and that is precisely the problem that we face. And Christianity has exactly the same problem because it's been colonized by tribalism, just like the rest of the world. There's evangelical, charismatic, Orthodox, Catholic. These are all tribes playing identity politics against each other, really.
But they've all got the same book. How come they get it all wrong? There's got to be something nefarious that's going on with that. If we look at, when you say about education, if we look at how they're teaching mathematics now, to add up and take away, they've got this massive equation, and if it's not written out, they get deducted points, even if they get the sum right. If it isn't written out how they're teaching them. And when I first saw how they were teaching them to do this maths, I'm going, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? What do you need that for? It was almost like I had to bring it back to, well, you go in next door and you're borrowing one and you just put it, I don't even need that. I need to make it a 10 and I need to put the 1 down there at the bottom. What's changed in that, Alex? Why have they made that so much more complicated? Why are they allowing children to write English as gobbledygook in text, even just as long as they get the content right? So the spelling, the grammar doesn't mean anything. The adding up and taking away doesn't really mean anything because they've got devices to do all this. So I think they've manoeuvred in the last 20 years. They've manoeuvred the education system into this open AI now, if you like, because AI is going to start teaching, and AI will teach them exactly what the government narrative is. Tony Blair, he's coming back on the scene with the Board of Peace. His prodigy is just going to walk into number 10. No, I don't want a general election. I'm just going to go in and do the job. So we have Count Binface, who's now not going to challenge Farage in a local by-election, which if he wins, he's going to push for a general election, and then he's going to vie for the PM spot. So we're seeing this story play out, and we're seeing it play out in front of a lot of ignorant people. People I know who are my age. Andy Burnham, he's a lovely bloke. Never met the man, but he's a lovely bloke because he watches football and he runs down the East Lancs and he's got us a bus route. It just seems like absolute clutching at straws all the time. Let's just see if this will play out.
Believe what to call good, what to call evil, and where authority comes from. This does not mean every teacher is evil. It does not mean every person receiving help is wicked. The issue is the system.
No, it's not liking it, but the issue is the system, but it's being built on, Alex, it's being built on ignorance, and that foundation that we've talked about before, it's important. So I think we're in quite a bit of trouble, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, coming back to, it was quite fortuitous that clip came back on because it came on the first time, and even though the full clip didn't play, brings it back to this question that you raised when you were talking initially about working out, which typically was with mathematics. Now, this is a complex issue. Around 90 years ago, when my dad was at school, he was left-handed. And they used to force left-handed kids to write with the right hand because they almost saw it like a disability. Now, we don't need to attribute that to a conspiracy of the cognitive elites to oppress left-handed people. We can recognise that structurally speaking, there were some prejudicial ideas about what normativity was, and that the schooling system was trying to produce people through the sausage machine. So left-handed people, obviously connected to the right brain, were more creative. They didn't really necessarily march in step with the system. So an attempt was made to force your handwriting to be a particular way, to make you write with your right hand forcibly, even though that wasn't the writing style that your brain had chosen. Now, the point about that is we see that as exclusively bad because we see that it has deleterious effects. And there are still people alive today who can tell you the tales of war about how they were oppressed by being forced to write with the right hand. But the aspects of it that isn't is because when you've got a system like that, techniques and methods are actually important. So it's the same like when you're doing mathematics. If you don't show you're working out, if you're trying to measure the child's knowledge, the processes that are actually going on in the brain to see how they got the answer, we could believe that the point is simply to get the right answer, which of course is the most important thing. But that doesn't mean that the methods and measuring the methods and techniques are not important. For example, if you leave school and you become a builder or a civil engineer, you need to understand the physics and mathematics of how a civil engineer would calculate how to build a bridge for it to be weight bearing and so on. You need to get those calculations right, although it could be considered to be abstract theory and somewhat irrelevant just to pass an exam on some form of structural mechanics of mathematics. It's actually crucial. So the methods and techniques actually are a bedrock. The problem isn't one or the other. The problem for most of us is when we see a system that swung the pendulum so far to one extreme, we go back to the other extreme, throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that there's no place for the things that we see currently presenting. Whereas the reality is, the truth is somewhere in the middle. We need the techniques and methods, but we need the actual life, the ecology that's related to. So, for example, if you teach maths in school and you just go to school and on day one someone says, this is the syllabus, turn over page 1, and you just start doing mathematics, and nobody explains to you why you're doing mathematics, it means that student, that pupil, that kid is not able to build a world where they can make sense of what they're doing right now in terms of how it's connected to what they might be able to do in the future, that's got some productive value that gives them skills and potential employability. So it's not the fact that the various aspects or elements of education are distorted or missing. It's the fact that even if we had all of them, if we do not give the learner the opportunity to understand the connection between things, you've actually taken the living ecology away. And that's whether it's school, and as we talked about in recent weeks, if it's the ecology of a church, which has still got all its symbols, and then each different church just configures them in a different way and then says, I've got my badge on, I've got the right truth. They've all got a part of the truth, but they're all partial. And they've lost the most important vital ingredient. So that's within churches, and you get into identity politics. It happens in politics with the left and right and all the division you're seeing all the time. It's just descended to pure tribalism. And you see it in education. You see it's all the way through culture. And the problem is people don't have the tools anymore. They don't know how to right the ship. It's like the ship started to sink and nobody knows how to stop it from capsizing. And it's a challenge on a cultural level, more than on the level of ideas, which we're talking about now. It's a cultural illness because people actually don't know what the problem is. They know something's wrong, but they can't quite figure out exactly what it is. And that's the real problem that we're dealing with. We've lost ecology, and it's like Humpty Dumpty. Nobody knows how to put Humpty back together again.
I'm not sure if they want him back together again,
Well, they do on their terms. On their terms, don't they? The elites have an investment in Humpty, and they want everyone to be buying the Humpty Dumpty T-shirts, just like following a football team. Everyone's getting excited now about pre-season. So the idea is the shirt and the badge, and the elites are no different. They're tribal as well, but they've got more power. They can propagandize us better. They can sell the shirts better. They've got better sponsorship deals. So they've got more influence, far more, over the apparatus, the cultural apparatus, to shape us and get us to lust after the new shirt, and not follow the conspiracy theorists, the people at the fringes. That's the only difference, really. They're playing the same game. They want Humpty put back together again so that you can buy the Humpty Dumpty T-shirt and wear it in the way that they've put it back together again, because that's how they want to put you together.
I think they prefer Humpty to be trans, neither Humpty or Dumpty. Somewhere
Yeah,
in the
well,
middle, I think they went in.
of course. Exactly, Paul. That's exactly it. If we can fashion this archetypal, and of course, that character has to be so fringe and alternative that everybody else becomes non-normative. This is the goal that you're aiming for. And it's what it is. It's all a calculated attack on what it is to be structurally and functionally human. And to be structurally and functionally human, you have to be relational in particular ways. You have to inhabit ecologies in particular ways. You have to have a set of behaviours in a particular way. Things like, even in old romantic rituals of courtship, if you destroy a lot of our cultural practices that gave meaning, we've still got the concept of romance, but it's underpinned by Hollywood notions of a very skewed understanding of what male-female love is. But once it's been installed in your operating system, and the traditional cultural practices, which were all about being slow, pacing things, taking your time, much more like an arranged marriage, not identical to it, but taking your time. But of course, everything's rushed through, and it's all rushed through and commoditized. It's a consumer society. It's a microwave society. And that's all driven by profit margin and power advantage.
Well, we see that the politics isn't going to change anything, because Andy Burnham scrapping the council tax and bringing in the land tax is just the same tax. It's going to be a commercial tax being incorrectly applied to non-commercial properties. Again, it's going to come down to how it's been registered. But nobody seems to be bothered about that. They're all arguing that this property isn't liable for it, and they're all correct. But if they're standing under that presumption, that's going to just stand. The money that's being spent, they claim that it's council tax that's been paying for all this stuff. That shouldn't have been paying for anything. Those books should have been balanced. There should be money all available, yet councils are applying for bankruptcy left, right and centre. So who is it that's bankrupt? Is it the council that's bankrupt, or is it the people? Is it a company that's spending the public taxpayers' money? Because that means that they're a middleman now. And that means if we're then treated as customers, which we are, they're doing nothing wrong. And I'm tired of it, Alex. I'm tired of the arguing and the bickering and people not understanding how simple this law is. It's just been applied incorrectly, and it's been applied to people who have been groomed. There's nothing devastating about it. But what I see where I see mathematics, where you've got 0 minus 8, which you can't do, so you borrow 1, so it's 10 minus 8, and you put the 1 at the bottom and add it to that, that now is so much more complicated in the working out. And I know from, family and friends who've had kids at school who've struggled with the working out. These kids are not, they're not incapable of learning, but the way they're teaching is I think it's a bit biased. I think that, when you've got people who read, regurgitate, or copy, regurgitate, those people look educated on paper. Look at me, I got 99 out of 100 and stuff like that. The factor is, though, are they being educated, or are they just regurgitating? Because we've got all these educated people with all these letters after their names, Alex, and they don't know anything. Me, myself, I've done 15 years in the prison service, and I've seen therapists. I've got more experience than the therapists, but they've got all the certificates and the letters. And they're trying to help people from, a 23-year-old girl trying to help a 40-odd-year-old man through mental health issues that she hasn't even lived yet. She's trying to go from a book and apply that book to somebody. And I don't think that we can do this. And I think that's why society is now going to start deteriorating, because they are fanning the flames for some kind of civil unrest. That there was an American girl who was battered, bludgeoned to death by an immigrant that she started to go and see at this immigrant camp and date. and did videos saying, look, how much we're in love, and she was learning Islam and all this kind of stuff, and saying, see, they aren't scary people, these are really nice people. He's killed her, and he's done one. He's run off to Turkey. Now, he was in Turkey before he came over to Ireland. So now he's gone back to Turkey. Why didn't he stay in Turkey? What was the point to him coming here? We can't ask these questions because the media just say, oh, look at these people. This woman's been beaten up. Doesn't mention any ethnicity. Look at poor Anne Widdecombe. She gets beaten up, and straight away it's a white British male. Oh no, we've let him go, but we've got somebody else, and he's a white British male. So it's like they're trying to prove a point. And I'm looking at the media now, Alex, and I don't know what to believe. We've got a massive mockingbird agenda going through all the mainstream media. They're repeating everything, they're just following each other's lead, and then they're arguing with each other at the right points to create those talking points for us. And we feel like we're involved. And you mentioned it a few weeks back, for most people, it's the part of feeling, part of something. I put my X in the box, I've done something. If you've not voted, you have no right to say anything. All that kind of stuff gives people something to talk about. But I think we've run out of time, Alex. I don't know if we can turn this oil tanker anymore.
The problem, just to use the terms of reference you were using before, when you started talking about, say, council tax and the fact that people aren't able to sort of turn it around because you don't recognise what's at stake, and then obviously you moved on to education, and they're connected. And the point is, you can't have education outside of an educating frame. So in much like the same way that if you don't have any cars, which would be like an educating, it would be like the frame. The frame is the car, it's the goal, it's the thing that you're going to produce when you become a mechanic. Then there are no mechanics because there are no cars. Therefore, there's nothing to educate and train people towards doing. So that's just a crude example of just a car and a mechanic. And you can't educate a mechanic outside of the frame that the whole discipline is geared to educating you around. So in every walk of life, around the council tax issue and so on, if people don't have an orientating frame, all the facts of life just become one complete big massive ball of mushy peas with no distinction, no boundaries between all the discrete areas. So in order to have a cogent model of education, you've got to have a set of principles and beliefs. So, for example, when we talk about Christian faith and we talk about the kingdom of God, we've got a social vision. So even if you take all of its theological and divine aspects away, the kingdom of God is a vision. It's a vision with a set of ethics, with some principles about, like the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto yourself. You're heading towards or working towards a functioning system which can maintain ecological coherence. In other words, it can become self-sustaining. It can sustain life. You might not choose Christianity, you might choose libertarian principles that talk about the importance of individual freedom. Once you take those guide rails away from people and they haven't found in themselves, and maybe they didn't get trained into them, maybe they just suffered, maybe they got bullied, maybe they got mistreated at the fringes, and they realised the importance of it when they were young. So they became committed to principles, ideas, values, structures which give cohesion. Education doesn't give people cohesion. Like I said, you start your first day of mathematics, this is the syllabus, you just start doing mathematics. Nobody says, why do you do algebra? Or why do you do calculus? At one time you would have done calculus in the 1980s potentially, when the microcomputer revolution started, so that you could work out the area under a curve for a graphics application to generate a computer game by using the mathematics. And so you could see that there was an application of calculus to computer programming, which was connected to gaming, which was connected to industry and making money. So if people aren't able to see, again, it's the same thing. You can put all the tools of a mechanic in an apprentice's hand, but if you've got no car to work on, the person's going to go, well, what's this for? Oh, I don't know. I just thought I'd put this wrench in your hand. Yeah, but what do you do with it? Oh, I don't know. There's no such thing as cars. Cars? What are cars? So you've got to have the car first. You've got to have the subject matter first. You've got to have a cohesive world that people are being educated and trained to function within. The problem that we've got right across the board, not just in economics and work and so on, but theology, politics, everything, is we don't have that frame. People are basically, in that sense, desolate, and they're just lurching from one experience to another. Unless you create your own meanings, you won't have any meanings. That's why so many people are depressed and they're demotivated, because education is also supposed to give you a vision, goals, motivation, whereas in fact it disempowers people. It turns them into being just a cog in a big machine. It doesn't help them to orientate and to understand the bigger picture, because of course the elites don't want you to understand the bigger picture. They want their own kids to understand that picture so that their own kids will succeed, while ours won't, because obviously population wise the elites can't keep up in terms of reproduction. So this is why for them they've got to use fair means and foul and wisely foul to maintain competitive advantage. They're just committing to their own interests, just like other people do, but they've just got more power and they're more ruthless and they're more prepared to eradicate people who get in the way.
Well, we can obviously see that, it's not just Rome that's burning. All Europe is burning. This country's burning. Yet, Nero's fiddling away though. There doesn't seem to be anything going, emergency legislation when all the fuel supplies went up. Emergency legislation for us to go on back into the North Sea. Where was that? Where's the emergency legislation that could help things? Yet the emergency legislation that they come up with is for next to nothing. Presidents are getting involved in withdrawing red cards in FIFA World Cups now. What's going on? How can this happen? We see in this World Cup, and I thought when VAR come in, I thought it was a really good way to commit a lot of fraud. And my opinion's only been bolstered by it. There was a penalty last night for England that was given and then wiped out. As far as I'm concerned, anywhere else on the pitch, that's a foul. Yet it's not given. Now that was mild, but when we're seeing going back nearly 60 seconds to disallow a goal because of VAR on a challenge that, it just seems like everything is false in this reality, Alex. I feel like when we're looking at players being paid 500 grand a week, you're not paying them 500 grand to kick a football. You're carrying a narrative. You're giving something. There's something. I can't quite put my finger on it, because it's not just a simple conspiracy theory. It's all these footballs, all these entertainment stars who are now all looking to Jesus. There's this movement to Jesus, and it was an interesting article I saw this week about apostasy, about the falling away. What if the falling away is all these people going looking for Jesus, but it's not Jesus, it's a Jesus, a version of Jesus? Is that the falling away from, because the church is already left. The church doesn't teach anything about the Bible anymore. It's just comfortable with allowing everybody in, and God said that's not it. Everybody can come, but these are my rules. And the churches have gone, well, what he means is you can do this and you can do that. There's one fella, he was arguing online with somebody saying, no, she said, so are you having sex outside of marriage? He went, no, sex is marriage. What? Sex is marriage. So I was laying with this woman, so I was having sex with her, so I was married to her. But then when I was going to get married, she decided to leave me. So now I'm not with her. So now I'll find somebody else. And she's like, well, what about getting married? And he was like, well, sex is marriage. So the man and woman coming together, Alex, becoming one, that's the marriage that he said, and that is living it in God's eyes. Now, what world do you make that up in? Because it's not scriptural. We don't have to go to a registry office or a church building, but we can't just go and do these things because there's a reason behind it. It's a dedication. It's one woman. It's not, oh, let's see how we go and let's just have sex and do all this. Why? Is it because sex is dirty? No. Is it because God doesn't like it? No. It's because all the traumas, all the damage that we all have, we bring them together and we smash them together and make an even bigger mess without being able to sort all these traumas out. This is why marriage is absolutely devastated. The amount of younger people who are looking to get married, the amount of people now who are single in the late 30s, 40s, who have never been married because they look for careers and things like that. It all sounded good, didn't it, 20, 30, 40 years ago when, women wanted to get into the workplace and all that. Sounded really good, but now we see an absolute mess where men don't know if they're men, women don't know if they're women, kids don't know if they're coffee tables or animals, and then they're being taught to not be able to understand grammar, language, adding up, taking away. We make our own language up now. It's this is like I don't know. I can't quite find the word I'm looking for.
Well, what it is, like, it's what I've just been saying. It's what I've been saying for the last few weeks and what I'm writing about. It's the ecology. Ecology is basically the incubator that makes life possible. And language is a part of ecology. Marriage is a part of ecology. Now, when you take the ecology out of marriage, because a marriage is two people building a life together. And what is that life? It should be a living ecosystem. So it's an ecology. But what happens when you get rid of the ecology, you maintain all the external aspects of it. Consumerism kicked in, turned it into a wedding, not a marriage. So it was the bride's special day. Then consumerism sold it to women, like it does with cosmetics, to make money. So what it did, it started to misdirect our attention. But while we still maintain some of the rituals, sometimes in churches, sometimes in registry office, then it just becomes some vague concept of commitment. But the point is, there's no ecology. The word commitment is, well, I feel committed today and then tomorrow I don't. There's no ecology. You can feel committed one minute and then, well, why do people become not committed? Because they become disaffected. And when you're disaffected, why is that? Well, I feel differently now. Well, why do you feel differently now? Well, because I entered into it with feelings in the first place. Well, why did you do that? Because I didn't have an ecology shaping my feelings. I just had my feelings. They were uncontained. There was no ecology. I saw this woman. She was gorgeous. And suddenly, my hormones kicked in. And next thing you know, we're having sex. I couldn't see anything wrong with it because it felt totally natural. And people go, that's totally logical, of course. It's logical when you don't have an ecological frame. That's why I'm developing this discipline now. It's new, called ecological frame theology, because you get systematic theology, doctrinal theology, dogmatic theology, philosophical theology, all these different theologies as categories. And so, in a way, now I'm adding another one, but hopefully with the point, it's an ecological frame theology. So our theology is basically useless, and many of the things that happen within society become incoherent and can't understand them properly if we don't place them within an ecological frame. So it's true of marriage. Like I say, courtship used to be a tradition that existed, particularly in this country up until probably the 1930s, 1940s, until the Second World War kicked in. And then, the deeper effects of the Malaysian society got rid of that, and it's just got worse and worse and worse. That's a part of ecology, the ecology of marriage. Then you'd have an engagement for a period of time. But you'd be courting, and there'd be certain rituals that you go through. They're now considered quaint, cute, and a lot of modern kids today would laugh at it. But they're the types of kids who will be jumping in and out of bed because they're sensation seeking, because they don't know any different, because they've not been guided, because they've not been given an ecology. Where do you find ecologies? Where do you find them? Churches used to provide ecologies, but they don't seem to provide that anymore. Oh, well, we got a Sunday school. Well, yeah, we moralise for a bit on a Sunday and then we go home. So what's ecological about that? Discipleship is supposed to be ecological. So if that breaks down, you will continue to have all the adult privileges and functions, like your ability to place your organs inside somebody else's, and that won't change. But all the ecological drivers that make that meaningful and expand it into 3 dimensions, they've all died. But it's like nobody noticed. And now we're living on that holodeck simulation that Star Trek often talks about that looks completely real because all the different artifacts are present. And we've got all the right words still, and we talk about education, and such is going to become a mechanic, and such is going to become an English literature teacher. But the whole discipline of English literature may become deranged. Don't worry about that. It's a small detail. Just become a teacher. Get your head down, study your exams, get your A-levels, get a degree, and you'll be able to teach other people this meaningless literature that you've had passed on to you. Because what is English literature? When you study it, you're supposed to enter into the ecology of a book, of the literature that you're studying, which was written presumably to represent an aspect of life and make it come alive, to engage the reader in order to do what? In order to make them come alive, but no, it's just entertainment. That's why people have no attention span, because they're constantly thrill seekers. Oh, that movie's crap. Or everyone wants to watch action movies. Oh, it's heavy on effects, low on plot. Well, yeah, because what we've done, we've destroyed people's capacity to be able to focus on enduring ecological things. That's why everything's deranged. That's why people on the left can mock the death of Anne Widdecombe, which is incredibly serious. And it's on the left who are totally vile about it. But it's also the same reason why the police can make the absurd claim that there is no reason to suspect that this is a politically motivated attack. When Anne Widdecombe lives in a remote part of Devon, are we supposed to believe that some random burglar just randomly turned up at a time when she was due to go on another political show, when the day before she'd outed the deep state and said on a show, yes, I do believe there is such a thing as a deep state in this country. And then within a few hours, she's dead. There's no reason to believe it's politically motivated. Well, the only world in which the police, a major institution of society, can make that claim coherently is one in which all of coherence is broken down. We can state that black is white and nobody bats an eyelid. It's obviously politically motivated, yet they can maintain with a big fog on, no, we've no reason to suspect that this is politically motivated, which is utter bunkum.
She did actually say that there was no evidence to show Ted Heath was a nonce, which, I don't know whether Anne's just being a bit reserved with the truth on that one, but maybe she knows where the bodies are. I don't know. I can't work out all these people who get into politics, Alex. They don't get anywhere without towing not just the party line, but what line they're being told to tow. So whoever goes into this number 10, it's looking like Burnham at the moment. If they push for a general, then we'll see what happens. But I don't know how it can change things for the better. I think things have got to run its course now. I don't know how we do that. We could have a few court case wins and stuff, but it seems like the machine is just carrying on going. We're making all these points as the machinery goes past us, and we're winning even some of these little points, but the machinery is still going off down the road. We don't seem to be stopping this. And we see the same patterns that have repeated themselves throughout history. We see the same players that are always there in these histories. So again, I'll see how we go with this with the video, Alex. But we've got to be able to sit and talk about this stuff, because if we just keep, shutting each other down and not speaking about it, then I don't know what there's left for the kids, because the kids are being groomed into, they're being groomed into a different type of citizen. And it's great there's a lot of people now want to unplug from the system, as in take all the rights back. But it's how do we do that? We do need to get that control over the presumption. So maybe we could look into something, that we could, because for me, there's nothing wrong with the system. It could be used and governed correctly. It would be okay. It's just the system, the way it's set up, and the ignorance and the apathy. I think the apathy is more dangerous, Alex, than actual people who want it done.
Yeah, well, I think apathy happens when people feel at a loss. You know,
You still there, mate?
yeah. I thought the video was going to come on, so I thought I'll just.
No, I was going to let you finish your point first, pal.
Yeah, well, you know, it's disorientation. You know, most people don't start off apathetic. They have experiences, and then they have them again in a different form. And they have them again in a different form, and then they have them again in a different form. It's overall after a while they sort of conclude that there's nothing they can do. Now, whether they're right or not doesn't matter. Once they conclude that there's nothing that they can do because they become worn down, because it's demoralizing. Now, it's clear that there's a strategy to demoralize people. It's an active strategy. The question is it possible for us, in the face of all these demoralization strategies, is it possible for us to galvanize ourselves and to somehow protect ourselves, immunize ourselves against this demoralization? That's why we have to be very careful to try and, if we can, remain as positive and constructive as possible in the face of all of this, because it is very depressing for a lot of people. I've known lots of people in the truth movement in the past who become highly depressed by the state of affairs because they're so disempowered. So it's like it's important to recognize where apathy comes from and to ask questions about, like, well, what can I do? And like I say, it's about how do we restore ecology? Because, you know, most of the time people look for an environment within which to thrive. You know, most people are not survivalists. Most people are not able to just be fully self-sufficient. So this is why human beings have, from the dawn of time, needed each other. And when we're divided, what we see somebody in a rival camp who's the enemy. I mean, when you look at the level of vitriol against Anne Widdecombe, it's just absolutely incredible. I can't believe that everyone skirted over it, like within a day or two. Oh well, yeah, you know, she had her head stuffed in. But anyway, what are we having for tea? I wonder what impact this will have on Andy Burnham, who's doesn't seem to have said a thing about it, or Clacton, or the whole thing that's going on over there. Oh yeah, Anne Widdecombe club to death at home. Her brain's bludgeoned in, 78 years old. All right, yeah. Anyway, a couple of days later. So what should we talk about next? I mean, it's astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing. But this is the world we're living in, and that's why people have become apathetic, or they just think it's all surreal. It's like just a movie, because you're like, how the hell do you make any sense? That all the moral values have gone out of the window, and people are actually celebrating people being bludgeoned to death.
Yeah, I know. You're right. That society is absolutely on a steep decline. But when we look over to what's happening over in the Middle East still, and I've seen petrol prices starting to creep back up again over here. Whatever is going on with Iran, this peace deal, under these acts that they've got, where Israel, Mossad, and the IDF are going to be able to join with the military of America, it's not in Israel's interest to have a peace treaty with Iran. So Netanyahu is just going to keep doing what he's doing. And they're all, to be firm, Alex, they're saying all the things that they should keep quiet, they're saying them out loud now. They don't seem to care. Now, people have been joining these dots for a long time, and we've been seeing these patterns. So we'll try a couple of videos, and
I don't care how long he works, and I don't care what he does. There is no job worth $2 million a year. That's why they pay athletes these fantastic salaries. I was listening to the radio the other day. They just contracted to pay one player on one team $6 million a year. Can you believe this?
And why is that?
It's the Roman circus. What does the emperor do when the people become restive, and when the people are asking questions, and when the people don't like the policies of the emperor, he sends them to the circus. He creates a circus. He builds a giant coliseum. And he begins to throw the Christians to the lions. And he has great chariot races and football games and basketball games, all to keep the idiots preoccupied with things that don't mean anything in the scheme of the entire world, so that they don't have the time to learn what the truth is, so they don't ever get smart enough to learn how they're being manipulated, so they don't ever question the emperor. 150 of the most powerful men and women in the world can meet in secret in Baden-Baden, Germany, and plot the fate of billions, and nobody even cares about it. But 6 football players go to lunch together, and it's in the headlines across the country. You have a reflection of the society in which that exists. I don't care.
Who knows the first 2 laws that Hitler implemented? Who knows the first 2 laws? Before the Nuremberg laws. Before that, we're talking about years before it. Hitler first comes into power. What's the first 2 laws? Okay, I'll save you the time. Rule number 1. No more pornography. No more homosexuality. None of that garbage. Not allowed. Berlin, in the 30s, in the 20s, was the Sodom and Gomorrah of the day. Homosexuality, pornography, all the bestiality, all the garbage of the world, that was the capital of the world. He outlawed it. You're no longer allowed, closed all the bars, all the gay clubs, all the production, which were all run by Jewish people, unfortunately. Second rule, you're not allowed to charge interest. No more interest. Now you would think, why? What does he care about interest? Well, because all the people that had the money, that lent the money out, were Jews. He said no more interest. Why? Because of the high interest that the Jews charged people was so high, it ruined, it destroyed the economy in Germany. They destroyed, just like they destroyed Russia a few years before that through their communism over there. Jews destroyed Russia, not Goyim. Jews destroyed. Communism is by Jews. Well, don't let anybody confuse you. You look at history, Karl Marx, all the other Reshaim, they're all Jews. Wicked, but nonetheless Jews. They destroyed Russia, and he wrote in chapter 2 of Mein Kampf, they destroyed Russia, now they're destroying Germany. Go to the store to buy bread, you had to take a whole horse carriage full of money. By the time you arrive at the store, it wasn't enough. Why? Because the inflation rate was so high. The bread became so much more valuable and your money went down. And at that time, the Great Depression was happening around the entire world. Everyone was in a financial collapse. America was a financial collapse. England was a financial collapse. Germany collapsed worse than everybody else. But after he passed this law, within 6 years, Germany became the leading, wealthiest economy in the world. They called it a financial miracle. Why? They were the only ones that were bold enough to stop interest. This is one of the biggest reasons of why he hated Jews. Because they destroyed the economy because of their greed.
There's an effort in the Congress to merge the U.S. military with the Israeli military. Is it true? What do you know about it?
The National Defense Authorization Act provides for the integration of the IDF and the U.S. military at the top, most sensitive levels of our military operations. And so they're merging.
Of all the militaries you could merge with, why pick the only one on the planet that's currently committing genocide?
This was folded into the bill. Nobody knows who put it in.
We don't know who pushed it?
We know whose idea it was. Benjamin Netanyahu. He's taking credit for this.
He has?
Oh, yeah, he says his idea.
It's literally treason. You're handing your government to a foreign government against the will of your own people who pay for everything. If there was ever a justification for shutting down Washington, it's this. There's an...
So, what a tangled web. What a tangled web that is, because these people, and again, is it anti-Semitic to point out that these people have all been, they're the ones that say the Jews, but they're not, obviously not. Yet they're in control of so much. That's a Jew that's saying all that. We had a clip of a couple of months back of Barbara Spector, who's no longer here with us, and she said that Europe has got to go into multicultural mode. They're not going to like it, and the Jews are going to be hated because of the prominent forefront position that they'll take on that. So we've got this happening all through Europe and this country, without happening in America. We've got all these elections that are arguing with each other, and they've got a border peace that's going to be regional. We're being talked about having a number 10 in the north. So we're going to have a king of the north and a king of the south. Oh, it's the same one. It's getting into realms of fantasy now, Alex. And people who have been groomed into this society with no foundation, as you said, ecology, what is there? How do you put this stuff together?
Yeah, well, it's tough, isn't it? I mean, you showed three separate clips there. Obviously, that was the third one that you focused on. So the first one, it's partially true, but we all know, the beautiful game was created by human beings. So yeah, loads of people are getting obsessed now about the World Cup, and loads of people staying up dead late, going to the pubs, and they're bonding through it, and they're all desperate in this country for it to come home, and so on. But the point is,
I've been there, Alex. I've been one of those men. I've been there once, devastated and then elated when you get that last minute winner and all that kind of stuff. I've been part of that tribe, but it's so distracting. And as we were looking back, that bill that's been put in, that Netanyahu, who's put it in, we don't know. He's took credit for it, but we don't know who's done it. And nobody cares. Nobody cares that the World Health Organization was going to take over this country and dictate what we were going to do about health and vaccines. What's the difference with this? No difference. Yet we keep seeing the same players. I don't know. I don't know what you can do apart from point at this stuff and say, "Come on, let's talk about it," because I don't think you can keep shouting racism and homophobic and all that. You can't keep shouting it anymore. I think people are ready to come for a conversation, but I'm trying to think who it was who mentioned it. It'll come back to me, but there was a clip about 9/11, and they said that that 9/11 was a false flag, and Laura Loomer it was that 9/11 was an obvious false flag. So she's admitting that was a false flag. It's not a false flag according to the government narrative. It's not a false flag, but Laura Loomer's saying it's a false flag, and she can see a false flag event happening this year. That's how she's drawn it up. Now, that's there, that's in the public, so that's going to go into the consciousness. When something happens, it'll just happen, and people won't ask questions. Look at the Charlie Kirk stuff, Alex. That's circus now. Did he get shot from the back, shot from the front? This fella's had a rifle, it's been in pieces, he's put it together with a screwdriver. Then he's jumped down off the roof, left the screwdriver up there, but he's put his weapon. It's just madness. And nobody cares. And those little bits, I think those little bits are put there on purpose to actually cause that confusion. The more confusion and the more outrageous these statements get, I think it does its job. I think it clouds everything.
But coming back to that first video, though, I just wanted to sort of complete that point that, we know it's the beautiful game. The problem that it is, when you make a critique at the level that the guy did, that it's all just distraction, that's part of the ecological problem that I'm talking about. Because eschatologically, even for Christians who, like not long after Jesus ascended, there was a belief that he would return soon. 2,000 years later, when it hasn't happened, you have to develop more of this worldly frame. You're born, one day you die. You have to find things to do during that time, and some of it is work, sustaining. Many of the stuff that we do, even since the gospel and Jesus and eternal life and so on, is just imagining a kingdom where the human beings who are born into this world configure that world properly. And in order for that to happen, yeah, they have basic structures. There's a formation, which is ecological formation, using the tools that God has given, scripture, prayer, community, all these things. And when you do that properly, okay, you've done those things properly. And 6 days shall you work and 1 day shall you rest. Now, do we believe that the beautiful game created by human beings, and some incredible games of football that get played, could you not imagine God saying he fancied attending a football match, if we could imagine God in those terms? That the beautiful game that humans created, which was part of the creativity he bequeathed to them, that, you know, you imagine, oh, there's going to be no football in heaven, or we don't do that, or we don't have something as mundane as musical instruments in heaven. In fact, we don't even have bodies. We've all just become gases. We just become clouds of consciousness. We don't need to be weighed down by a body anymore. We become Gnostic. So there is something amazing about football, but also the fact is there are things we still have to do. Entertainment isn't evil. Entertainment is something which is a part of joy, fun. There's nothing wrong with that. So if we get into too austere a version of Christianity, it's another ecological derangement. So if you go too much to the opposite extreme, that is also a problem. So we've got to be really careful when we reconstruct an ecology to think, well, actually, what would it look like? And the thing is, nobody knows. Because nobody knows, it's easy for somebody to critically just say, well, yeah, obviously, when people go to football matches, all they're doing is they've been conned by the elites to be distracted and not look at the other things that are going on in the world. Yes, there's an aspect of Saturday night TV, for example, that is about distraction. But does that mean that every leisure pursuit, every bit of fun that people have, even if they get a sense of solidarity with other people, that's just automatically wrong or a form of idolatry? It just can't mean that. But the problem is, people's responses become very black and white. And so they go, oh, no, that's what it is. It's just distraction. I don't think it is just distraction. I think there's a problem. If you follow a football team, home and away, in such a way that that's displaced God, I think you need to, you need to sit down and have a word with yourself. But does that mean there's no scope at all to have any football anywhere? Because what you would end up doing, you would see every embodied activity that humans do that are not around work or worshipping God would be evil, and you won't be able to do anything. So the logic doesn't follow. And unfortunately, we've got a lot of people making statements like that, which have got an element of truth, but then they're saying that that's the exclusive truth, but it's false. When you push it to that extreme, it's false. What are people going to actually do with their lives? You know, they're not going to sit down all day and just worship God 24/7. I mean, originally, that was the point about the Sabbath. It was 1 day set apart, and six other days you'd do other stuff. You'd be mindful of God, but you'd live your life, the life that God gave you as a gift to live. Not, oh, well, I don't want this life now. I just want to worship God all day. Right. Well, that sounds exciting. Do we think that God just created us just to worship Him and do nothing else? I just don't buy that.
Well, I think when we're looking at what Yuval Harari said at the World Economic Forum, when he said that AI is going to take up 85% of the jobs, and the commentator said, well, what are the people going to do? And he said, well, most of them will be able to give them entertainment and drugs, maybe something like that. But the population's going to come down, so they're going to give that instead of that low education, because people aren't going to be educated. So look at the people now, Alex. I've corresponded with at least 3 people who have got a job programming AI, and all 3 of them know that they're programming themselves out of the job. They know that once this is finished, that they won't have a job. So we're going to have all these people who've got these skills, but they're not going to be able to implement them anywhere because the system's going to be good enough. All these data systems, they're already talking to each other. Maybe not legally, but they're already talking to each other, already sharing. But the one thing that we know, Alex, is that it's not going to be safe. People are going to end up being hacked, losing things. And if we're talking about our own bodies being hacked, this has gone way beyond anything what I saw in the 70s, with Logan's Run and things like that, of what the future is going to be like. Where, Brave New World, where when you come together, you don't have sex, you don't do things like that. Your baby's created somewhere else, and you have to apply for a license. people all laughed at that and said that would never happen. And yet, I don't think, certainly in my lifetime, we've ever been close worldwide to get the majority of this stuff implemented. And then to think about the stuff that we talk about where wag the dog, where we see these, oh, look at this missile attack, look at this, what's happened. Tom Telly, we don't know the truth of what is going on over there. And with AI now, again, I think it's one of those, Alex, where when anybody sees it now, they automatically go AI. They don't know whether it's false or not. And that's good enough for them. It's good enough to just cast that doubt on. They don't need it to be clearly wrong or clearly right. Let's just throw a bit of crap on it, just cover it over a little bit. And
Yeah.
if you've got a so-called plan as well that's worldwide, then I don't know how this plan works, because if you're saying Europe and the WEF is one factor, well, where does Israel come into it? And then you've got the Americans. Well, where's China and Russia come into this? Because they all seem to be part of the same game. They all want to rule the world. Nothing's changed.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is as well here, mate, if you lose ecology, I'm going to keep bringing it back to this. If you lose ecology, you lose choice. And if you lose choice, you lose, effectively, you're losing the ability or the capacity to discern between two different options, at least two different options. The one thing that changes things in the human arena, if it's not talking about divine intervention, is when humans make choices. And when those choices are aligned with healthy ecologies, what will happen is you'll build more healthy ecologies. But when people feel disempowered, they'll make choices based on depravities, things that suit other people. The whole point about taking choice off people is in order for, when people do that and they think it's healthy or good for them, they are depriving that person of an opportunity to make a choice, so that, let's just call it the status quo, or the state of affairs that suits the person who wants to do the manipulating, so that continues to be propagated. So the one thing that turns it around is making meaningful choices. But what makes them meaningful is the ability to discern between different ones and being able to evaluate why making one choice is superior to another. Because if you can't evaluate the comparative value of your choices, then you go say, well, on what basis am I doing anything? And it's going to be things like pleasure. It's going to be short-term decision making. This is better than this because it's advantageous to me as I see it right now. And then the problem with that is people lose long-range planning ability. They're only capable of reacting, not even responding, just reacting in the moment. Given two choices, which do you choose? Given 5 choices, which do you choose? Hey, I got 5 choices. Yeah, but all 5 choices were circumscribed by the elites. I'm not bothered about that. Give me a cable channel with 5,000 choices, and that'll be better for me. I've got choice.
Winning.
Yeah. But you've not got choice. You've got the illusion of choice. And the more different options that you appear to have, the more you'll feel that you've got meaningful choice. But what about the choice that you've not been given? What about looking beyond the horizon? And that's the problem. When people become conditioned and you've got a facsimile, you've got a copy, then it can look as if you've got agency, but you don't have the type of agency that you need to change the fundamental rules of the game. And of course, that's what's actually happening, and it's eroding us over time slowly, like the boiling frog in the cold water at first with the temperature being turned up. This is what's happening. It's been done by stealth, so people don't notice, but they don't know. They just know something's wrong. They know that they can't make choices that could really work for them, because they don't even know what could work for them, because they don't know what the options might be. And we've already given several examples of that. People don't know how to make relationship choices anymore. They're healthy. They're surrounded with derangement everywhere. Then when you don't have viable containers you'll go, well, I've still got needs. So I suppose since I've got no viable container, I'll just do this and let somebody call me immoral. And then I'll just attack religion. Go, oh, you're only doing that because you're religious, because you believe in this antiquated book. So they'll just blame the reason why someone's tried to point it out as coming from some archaic cosmic overlord, and it's not particularly modern. So it just becomes a self-perpetuating system of justification. And the further we go down into this, the more we descend into it, the harder it's going to be to get back out.
I don't think the plan is to come back out. I think they're going to get deep enough for it to be cut off. And, like we heard on the clip where the British, after World War II, between World War I and II, the British economies, German economy, everything, all that usury, all that interest, what they were charging, that's what destroyed Germany. Those reparations were that destroyed the German economy, and then all the land being dissected up by the people who caused the war. And then when this stuff's pointed out, and somebody comes along who's not very happy about it because the country has been absolutely disemboweled, well, let's look at our country now. Let's look at Ireland. The countries have been disemboweled by allowing open borders of a culture that has never been in Europe. The culture of it's normal. We've got people coming over from places where it's normal for them to rape women, where women will put like a rape trap thing inside them, and it allows penetration, but then it takes this trap with razors on that stick into the man, and it has to be surgically removed. Is that our next step, Alex? Is that what we've got to do for our women now? We've got to protect our women wearing stuff like that because they can't protect themselves. We've seen it with white lads getting assaulted by 3 black lads, and the white lad gets put up against the shutters and put in cuffs. Is that a mistake? Is it another mistake? Is it several mistakes, or is it being done on purpose? I'm watching videos with police, and I've seen one lad throw 4 police officers about, holding onto railings, and he ends up taking a baton off one of them and smacking him and getting away on a bike. Now, I texted my mate who's a CNR instructor, and I just went, what are they teaching the police? How is that restraining, just holding? There was no restraining. It's like the police didn't know what to do. Once you put your hands on somebody, Alex, you've got to know what you're doing. Once you put your hands on, you don't just go and put your hands on. You've got to know what you're doing, and the police just don't seem to know what they're doing. And they're certainly taught differently to prison service staff. If a prison officer's in a situation where he feels he's going to get assaulted and he feels his life is in danger, he can get the first one in. He can hit the prisoner. That's what we're trained. But the police aren't. It's, well, I've got to let him hit me first. Well, you're just off onto a loser, so that's why you end up with coppers who just want to talk and make things nice. But then when they've had enough, you may have one copper who could maybe handle himself, but then you've got to wait for people, and they're coming from all over the place. Like I said, 4 female coppers not being able to do anything until the male officers get there. Again, do we start arguing about women can do the job as good as men? If you're a 20-stone bloke and you're in a fire, do you want a 5'5" woman coming up and dragging you out, or a 6'2", 25-stone lad carrying you out? It doesn't. We've got to be honest with what these jobs are. But to have that conversation, you have to risk being offensive. You have to risk offending people. And society doesn't like being offended. I remember Anne Widdecombe did a speech about that, saying you haven't got the right to live life without being offended. You've not got that right in a society. Take yourself away from society, she said. Well, there's nowhere for us to take ourselves off to, Alex. We're here. Where do we run to? Could run to Poland. That's not as bad. But what else do we do, mate? We've
The
got to
point that
we've got to fix our own backyard, I suppose.
the point that Anne Widdecombe made I think it was at Oxford when she said that's to these, young things who think they're all that because they're at Oxbridge. That itself is a symptom of the problem. So, at the end of the day, of course, objectively, what she's doing in that moment, Anne, is she's identifying a problem about a reaction that has become embodied in a culture, but that culture is a dysfunctional ecology. So what she says is correct at the level it presents, but offers no solution to why the problem actually occurs in the first place. And when you speak to those people who already have those convictions that you're trying to talk them out of, you're just going to get resistance. This is why the model of the kingdom that Jesus spoke about, when people say God is love in a very trite and cliched way, a bit like the New Age love and lighters banging a drum and being all sentimental, that wasn't what the reality was about the love of God. It's much deeper. The love of God is what you see when he comes off his throne and enters into a corrupted world and lives the life, experiences the traumas that we experienced by taking on human form. That's love. Like Jesus said, no greater love has any man than this, than he laid down his life for his friends. And I call you friends if you do what I command you. And then what was the command? To love one another as I have loved you. So it's like, there you go. It's a level of devotion and commitment to a set of values. Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. As soon as you start talking, like Anne Widdecombe did, correct though it was, she's bringing about the same resistance, about being offended. Because, of course, there's always the exception. If you go out and just gratuitously cause somebody offence, like some comedians are very good at doing that, and that can serve an important social function. It can stop us being so jumped up and self-important. But you can actually cause offence, and you can deliberately cause offence, and some people do so. They are not productive contributors to society. I mean, there's one thing calling it like it's, saying it like it is, which is what Anne Widdecombe does, and there's another than just deliberately winding somebody up and creating grief and mischief. So the problem is she overstated the case as a corrective to the problem in the culture, but it was never going to be an answer. It's never going to work at that level because it doesn't give people principles to live by. Not being offended is just potentially a choice not to be offended. But what's the constructive vision of how you're going to live your life? What are the framing conditions? Why do mechanics become mechanics? Because we've got cars. Why do people choose to live a life in a particular way? Well, because we have a vision, or we don't have a vision of society. So unless we've got those framing conditions, and this is why this show ultimately, for all the stuff that we touch on about in the modern world, current affairs, and truth, overlapping with the truth movement, the reality is there have to be higher principles that ground us. Even if you don't choose Christianity, and you're going to choose libertarianism, and you're going to choose a principle that everyone should be free, and then try and work out what the hell that means in practice. Even then, it's not obvious. If you've got two neighbours, and one of them decides to put their music on dead loud, and it's got past a certain time when you go to bed, then their freedom, their liberty as a libertarian, if they infringe on your rights, if they're imposing a cost on you, then they're imposing on your freedom. So you can't just have an individualistic notion of liberty. You've got to have a notion of liberty and freedom. And God gives us free will. So God would be a libertarian in that general sense. But how does that work in a community where you have to have respect for one another as well as following your own interests? It becomes really complicated the bigger a society gets. How are you going to think about yourself and others without erasing yourself or erasing your neighbour? How are you going to live respectfully? So, Jesus talked about the golden rule, do unto others as you have them do unto you, but that doesn't cover everything. It's a rule of thumb. So when you get beneath that, when that principle breaks down and you've still got a neighbour dispute, what are you going to do then? Are you going to kill your neighbour? Or are you going to love your enemy? Love your neighbour who could become your enemy and work through it with them and demonstrate the right qualities. And this is ultimately I think the remedy that Jesus provided, not just on the cross, but what he taught, in the sense of, well, you know, when's it appropriate to turn you a cheek, to absorb that energy, to transmute it rather than to sort of react to it and escalate, become tribal. And you know, we know where that ends. Cain kills Abel, and then look what we face today: mass murders, serial killers, on a unbelievable scale. So, you know, humans, by propagating evil, make more evil. So
Yeah,
you know, I mean, we've got to take a stance.
I think from the 60s, well, I'd say from the 50s onwards, we seem to have that real purple patch of serial killers in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Then, you know, it didn't seem to be as much. But when you go into these, because I study a lot of crime stuff, and when you see the crimes, you know, serial killers don't go away. There's so many serial killers we don't hear about. Cases that have been cold for 30, 40, 50 years, and they're just starting to come to light now. But they need they need to expand it. So they've got the DNA, they can find it, but if they've not committed an offence, they're not going to be in coldest. So what do they do if they've no suspect? Well, in America, they've been going into the genealogy stuff. Over here, we don't seem to like that, but we have done it. So we're getting familiar DNA from genealogies that is now, you know, it seems to be pushing where everybody's DNA, everybody's thing's going to be on this data base. Everything's going to be there. That means you're going to go to minority report type things. And it's like, if society gets worse, people will accept it, Alex. People will be willing to accept that. Taylor's mentioned it a few times about, you know, they're going to have to accept of losing a few rights. Well, you know, the problem with accepting losing a few rights is we don't normally get them back without spilling some blood.
All
With
Bob
that,
Ross, mate. It's all Bob Ross.
Yeah, get Bob on it. With that, Taylor, how are you doing?
Doing all right. How about you?
I'm okay, mate.
Sorry, I'm really late.
Say again, Oliver.
Said sorry, I'm really late.
Yeah. Is everything okay?
Yeah, everything's doing all right. I was just busy doing stuff. I've been really busy the last week trying to outgrow the channel. I talked to somebody, and they gave me some advice about how to attract some more people to my channel to grow it bigger. And I've been trying to work on that. So it's been a bit of a doozy, while also trying to stream as well, so that way I can attract more subs and, you know, keep the flow going, as they say.
Good stuff.
Anything out of the ordinary happening in your backyard?
Honestly, it's just at this point right now, it's just more of the same. Just more of now that the World Cup thing is passed, now we have and now people are asking the obvious question of, okay, we pushed all the fetties out into like downtown, into like the Chinatown area. So it's like, okay, now that the World Cup's over, now they're just going to come back into all the main streets and do their stuff again. So it's like, well, now we should probably think about a permanent solution to deal with this problem, instead of just, you know, shoving them all out and then having them come back once the World Cup's over. So, because every time they do that a lot, like around here in Seattle, in the Seattle area, where they have the homeless people and drug addicts. It's like, what they do is, whenever, and this shouldn't be, and I'm sure this isn't surprising, what happens is that they in order to make a good impression on the cameras and on all the guests and all that, you have what they do is they shove all the they shove them all to like a different part of town where nobody's going to be, and then when the sporting
I thought that's what all the FEMA camps were for, to do, that put them in there.
You know what? Maybe they should bring back the FEMA camps for these people.
See, that is very dangerous. Maybe for these people. What if you're one of those people? What if you end up being one of those people, not homeless, but what if you end up being one of those people that everybody else decides must be in
Yeah,
these
like
camps?
rehabilitate the animals.
Well, here's the thing: is that context matters, and you always gotta keep in mind of like who's the one in charge and who's the one that's making those decisions. Because at the end of the day, FEMA camps are like anything else. I mean, they can be a weapon. It all just depends on who's using them. Just like the military. The military can be used in order to do like massive Soviet style conquering, or it can be used just to maintain order and protect people. So it's really like anything else.
Well,
So
what are you two going to do with Mossad then? When you and the IDF merge, what are you going to do, mate? What are you going to blow up? What are you going to kill?
oh man, yeah, I heard about that whole thing. Just sounds like just sounds like more just more info space stuff. Not really interested because we know Israel's already under submission anyway. So I'm not really thinking about that at the moment, as much as I'm thinking about more of when are we finally going to get to the big stuff. So it's unfortunate, but then we also had some big developments going out of the strait, where we have of Hormuz, where we can clearly see now that what the point of this whole thing was, or at least one of the biggest points, was to take away the Strait of Hormuz away from the city of London, which I might have mentioned this before, but you got to optically weaken the city of London as well in order to bring in this quote unquote golden age, which hopefully will be good, and hopefully we'll get to see it soon. So, but yeah. So, because it's not just Israel, it's not just the Vatican, it's also Washington D.C., the city of London, et cetera, the Five Eyes. That's all something you got to keep in mind.
Sounds like he's waiting for somebody to announce peace and safety, Alex.
It's hard to say what the crack is. I mean, like what happened with Ukraine, for such a long time, it was this massive hot potato in the news all the time. And then, of course, it died off. And we know there's distraction goes on. And then, obviously, it's gone back into obscurity over the Strait of Hormuz. And when will it become a live issue again for people? When the price of the pump goes up. So that people are deciding. And I find it plausible what Taylor's saying in a sense in terms of the British Empire and City of London, which is effectively the British Empire. It's controlling base. Obviously, Trump's engaged in some sort of proactive warfare against the old establishment. He's still doing it now. How that's going to pan out in terms of Israel, because it looks one way to us. Obviously, Taylor's got a completely different view about what's going on beneath the surface, and these are just stories and speculations that we've all got, and we'll see what happens over the next year or two. But I think we're coming up to a very significant 18 months. For me, there's going to be a decisive shift, and probably starting this month. I think things that have been a little bit up in the air are going to become quite a lot clearer. I think things will clear up in the international scene.
Well, there's so much going on. We've got all the media crap going on. We've got the war stuff going on. But one thing I didn't have on my bingo card for 2026 was sexually transmitted diarrhea. Cases are surging, virtually untreatable it is. Sexually transmitted diarrhea. I've never heard of it before in my life.
I mean, I do find it interesting. I saw that. Did you post that on your timeline?
I will have done, yeah. I posted it.
Yeah, I wondered where I'd seen it, and it was interesting to me at the time because obviously it's weird with Facebook. If you engage with a post, even if it's to be critical of it, it dumps even more of that kind of thing. So I seem to get totally battered with all these Australian H5N1 stories about these birds. It just doesn't let up. And like I said last week, they're all constructed to be so absurd that no sane person could believe. I mean, it's the same with sexually transmitted diarrhea. It's almost like the word diarrhea is in there because you know that the report itself is verbal diarrhea. So if we just say sexually transmitted diarrhea, we've got two concepts there, which will make most people think, what's the joke here? Sexually transmitted diarrhea story. Because it just doesn't, sexually transmitted diarrhea, it's incoherence. So it's the diarrhea thing that sort of slaps you. And it's like, all right, yeah, sexually transmitted diarrhea. They don't seem to operate in the same domain. But now all of a sudden they do. And that's, I bet, it's collapsing all the boundaries into absurdity. Now, I mean, to be honest with you, that should be laughed at as absurd. And I do see a lot of ha-ha emojis on these posts. It's like people just are not buying it. So this is when we come back to Taylor's position, which we've mentioned a few times in the last couple of weeks, that there is some sort of influence in the media because they couldn't be that dumb. I often post on some of these posts, particularly if it's not a written medium, if it's a video like a news reporter, and they're talking to each other about H5N1 and they're keeping a serious face. I'm looking at it and they're talking about it as if it's factual. The same with climate change stuff. They talk about it as if it's factual. They don't bat an eyelid. They look totally serious. And you know that everybody who's watching it is just laughing because it's so absurd. And sometimes I'll comment and I'll say, are these people, are they acting? Or do they really believe this? Because they come off as if they believe what they're talking about. But anybody who's watching it knows it's utter guff. Now, is that just because they're living in a totally different world, or is there something staged going on?
Well, that's where I'm stuck, because these people actually, they either totally believe in this crap, or they're acting, they're pulling an agenda. We know that the whole world is a stage. We know that all this stuff that's being played out, as far as I'm concerned, it's, Taylor's mentioned it quite a few times. It's not only Wag the Dog, but it is a stage show. The problem that I've got is the players all seem to be going towards the same crescendo, the same, it's like we're building up to this massive ending. And, I don't think we did have a kind of a shooting over the World Cup, but we've not had this false flag thing yet. I don't know what it is. Don't know what, and it could happen in several countries, but I think we're just being weighed down with everything. People are tired. People just want to, they want to turn football on and forget about everything. It's strange how all of a sudden they were applying for emergency legislation so that people could drink while they watched England. So again, emergency legislation for that. Where is it for the rest of the stuff? What we're really in trouble with. If you can bring up emergency legislation to allow somebody to have an extra 6 pints while they watch England and then stagger out the pub at 5 o'clock in the morning when they've probably been there since 5 o'clock in the afternoon. A lot of people didn't even go to work. My bin didn't get emptied this week because apparently they couldn't get access. How many areas have they couldn't get access for because they'd have been a day behind because they wanted to watch England?
Well, yeah.
Society is being ushered into a big nanny state where, as I started with that first video, everything is being taken over by government. And, even Taylor's saying government are being that nanny state. They've got to treat the people like children Taylor's waiting for the big stuff. Me too.
Yeah, well,
Let's get it out.
This point about ecological derangement, actually, ecology again, is right at the fore. The fact is, the government rush emergency legislation through for people to for licensing to be late, so the people of this country can watch England play a game of football, is because it's the best thing that people can do now. It's the best model of unity. Even though on another day, if people were to fly St. George flags, it would be considered to be divisive in a different arena because it would be considered to be nationalistic and therefore racist. But when it comes to football, that's allowed. But why is it allowed, and why are they bending over backwards to allow the extended licensing? Because even the ruling class now do not know do not have the capacity to generate truly cohesive ecology. The best thing that they've got is a facsimile. Everybody, the whole country can come together around England. That kind of nationalism is okay, but why is it okay? Because on another day, it would be considered divisive. Because, again, it used to be associated with hooliganism. But now the country comes together. Well, it's like it's a passing thing. Let's just say England won the World Cup. 2 days later, everyone goes back to normal. Yeah. That's it. So the reality is there's nothing of any lasting value, but it shows you how desperate governments are when they have to start doing that. Right? And to be honest, I could never feel sorry for a government because a government's an agency anyway, and they're quite monstrous at the best of times. But I do feel not sorry, but a bit melancholy because it shows you how deranged the state of affairs is. Because I think government do it because they don't know what else to do. I think we always see them as sinister and calculating and doing things deliberately, and there's definitely a lot of that going on. However, I think at points they themselves have lost the plot. They want to achieve certain goals and to brainwash people and condition them in a certain direction for their own advantage. So they do that. The establishment come together against Farage, for example. They'll do that. But I do think that on some levels they still genuinely want to solve the problems. They're just looking in the wrong place. And because they're looking in the wrong place and it's all about power, they've no idea how to turn the ship around. So they go, oh, look, here's an opportunity. If England win the World Cup, fantastic. We'll have unity. It's like, come on, really? You think that's going to foster unity in this country? It's papering over the cracks. It's putting a elastoplast on an open wound. But they're that desperate that they'll cling to anything.
They certainly are clinging to anything at the minute because politics has never been in a worse state, and people are just going to vote for anything and anybody. One of the worst things I heard during the local elections near me was people advising people to vote for the person, not the party, because the person's nice. So vote for the person, get the person in. And I know you've said about, well, reform is the only way that you're going to split the domination that's gone on. And I think it's put there to do that, but we're not splitting anything to win anything. As you said before, it's all there ready. The narrative is all there. Here's your choices. Look how many choices you've got. You've got 3 now. Conservatives, Labour, or reform. Which one do you want? Oh, all the choices. And, you've got people all debating the same thing. Andy Burnham has done nothing but put the country backwards for me, but he'll point to a bus route. He'll point to Hillsborough. Not good enough. Not good enough. Not good enough to jump on those bandwagons and use public money to push policies that you had to cancel because nobody wanted them, but you couldn't even get them in place. But coming Prime Minister, that gives him access to a whole new set of coin. And it's tiring because you just hear people having those same old debates about politics. It's like nothing has changed. It's just going to carry on. And I don't think it is this time. I think we're generally going to see a collapse. It's happened before, but our generation, Alex, hasn't seen it. Our generation been quite prosperous. We've seen it decline. From 2000, I think that's when it started. 2000 started to decline. Obviously, 9/11 and 7/7 changed a lot of legislation and made a lot of police forces get a lot of different agendas and all that kind of stuff, right up to the point where when they were talking about mass vaccinations, I thought nobody'd ever fall for that. That was 2009, and then bang, 2020, people are getting them for donuts and Burger King and going to strip clubs and having a private dance. Have your jab and have a private dance. Why do you need all those incentives if this is such a good thing?
Yeah.
Then sexually transmitted monkeypox. and it was a massive breakout at a pride festival. Well, if monkeypox is sexually transmitted, who shagged the monkey and then went and shagged all these people? What's going on?
Yeah, well, the thing about, on the deepest possible level, I think there needs to be, if we're going to turn the ship around, there needs to be a constructive position that we can take, because that's when things become deranged, derangement becomes definitive. So to me, if you look at Christianity, and let's just, instead of calling it a religion, call it a faith. And when people think about a faith, they think primarily about a belief system. But to me, the thing that needs to change about Christianity is precisely that it's not a belief system. But everybody believes it is, because they're obsessed with beliefs. Everyone's having beliefs. Everybody's making their own beliefs sacrosanct and saying my beliefs are the right ones, everybody else's beliefs are the wrong ones, and then saying, and this the faith that I follow is what tells you it's right because it says it is, right? So the point about it is, Christian faith might appear to be about beliefs, but it's about life. So ecology is life. It's a viable ecosystem. So what's going to have to happen, I think, is that those of us who actually have a constructive vision of faith in the kingdom of God are going to have develop the tools, call it prophetic insight, and tools by which that we'll be able to stand strong in the face when things collapse. Because people don't have answers, they've got tons of questions, or they stick their head in the sand. They don't want to be terrorized by the questions, they stick their head in the sand. There's no leadership, there's no guidance. The best of politics is naff, right? There's a few voices that say a few sensible things. There are some, well, one party, two parties maybe, that are more credible than the others, but in different ways. And they're only a very small partial solution, better than nothing. So we can't rely on these leaders. It's like what Jeremiah and Ezekiel said about the false shepherds. They weren't really leading the people properly. So we're going to have to be people in a position when it does collapse that can, kind of grasp the nettle and say what we need in the reconstruction here is not reconstruction of a belief system. To say, well, that belief system, it's wrong. Oh, look, and that's what plays in the belief system thing, is what plays into the hands of this whole thing that we talked about with, Judaism and Islam and the Unitarian Christians returning to a radical monotheism, the Noahide laws. When you've got a beliefs-based religious or faith perspective that governs everything, it becomes ideological, political, structural. You've got a problem because it's driven by beliefs, not by life. Everyone's got beliefs. I believe that when I get
That's exactly it. That's exactly the problem. When I hear apologetics talking, they always, the Muslims always say, well, we believe. I don't care what you believe. Let's talk. Let's read the text. Let's read the text in these books. It's the same with the text in the bills of exchange, in all legislation. It's the same concept. Let's read what it says. Let's not just have these concepts that, hey, that kind of seems to fit. Let's go with that. I've known people in the last 20 years do a court case based on feeling. And it was nothing. Once they started asking questions, they were stood there with nothing to say, pushing a birth certificate forward and tapping it, saying, that's who you're looking for. Oh, are they not here? That's it. Oh, Mr. Smith mustn't be here. We'll find in his absence. And the puzzle, they stood there with a puzzled look on their face saying, how's that happened? So you've got all this stuff that, advice that I knew 20 years ago not to do. Well, because people have had enough, they're being given that advice against some people. So it is still causing all these issues. When we look at if you look at Andy's lad who's running to Manchester Mayor, so they've been campaigning again, and they've got a big red bus, and Lisa Nandy's been, that useless pudding, she's been with them. celebrating the England win. So it's going to expand the B work network buses and trams. We wanted a train. We didn't want buses, but she's going to expand the buses. Deliver 50,000 council and affordable homes. Bearing in mind this MP can lie legally. Use money generated by city centre growth to invest back into every town and high street. Crack down on crime and antisocial behaviour. Same old shite, Alex. Pardon my French, but this stuff's really challenging me now that people can just listen to this guff and think, yeah, she sounds like she's worth voting for. I need that bus route. You know, I don't know what to say. What happened to the rape gang inquiry that Andy Burnham decided to abstain from? He didn't want anything to do with it. What's going to happen to that if he becomes PM? Is he going to look into it? Because we've still got all these cases. We couldn't get emergency legislation to ship a Pakistani rape gang leader back to Pakistan. Why? Well, he gave up his Pakistani citizenship. And Pakistan went, no, we don't want him. He's yours. Where's our emergency legislation, Alex? We can do it for drinking, for watching World Cup, but, you know, we don't seem to have our priorities right. And when you mentioned the ecology being stripped, there's no foundation in this country anymore for people. And when society's like that, it goes insane. And we are going insane.
Yeah. Basically, that's the long and short of it. But I mean, that's a bit like the powerful delusion that's mentioned in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. But the good news is that if we can find a way, I mean, we've got a little Bible study and prayer unit that meets on a Tuesday evening. There's usually 3 of us, sometimes 4 of us. We've never been bigger than, I think, 5 attending at any one time. So it's a small group, and it's not mainstream, and it's because largely we struggle to attend the mainstream sociological constructions of church that we see that mainly offer services to people, which, you know, I'm not saying there's no place for offering services, but that wasn't the strict New Testament model of fellowship, which was koinonia, was the Greek word for that. And, you know, really coming alongside each other and really building a culture, which is an ecology. And we have to do it online because we live a distance apart, number of miles in the double digits. But we do the best that we can. And we're trying to keep an ecology alive. And what does an ecology do? It should sustain all of its participants. So what people are crying out for is cohesion. You know, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And everyone focuses on no man coming to the Father but by me, the doctrinal bit. But let's just focus on the first 3 bits, shall we? I am the way, the truth, and the life. So you don't come to the Father but by him, not because of doctrinal confession, but because life is life. God's the creator of life. He's the restorer of life. The enemy, the opponent, was the destroyer of life. He wanted to destroy us. And we were given an out because of remedy to enter back into that life. You don't come back to the source of that life, the Father, except through the one that embodies the truth, the way, which is the path to get there, and the life, which is the embodiment of it. So that isn't advocating, in the words of Jesus, not for a doctrinal confessional position that people agree to and say, right, can I get into heaven now? I said the right mantra. But no, do you want to be in a living ecology, a living relationship with God through Christ and with each other? And if we don't build those structures, look at Nebuchadnezzar in the Old Testament. He became deranged because he was a powerful king, the statue, you know, with his head and shoulders of bronze. He was the most noble of them right at the beginning of this system of you know, the different metals that made up the statue that at the end would fall, come crash into the earth, because this rock or stone, not made by human hands, which is referring to Jesus, strikes the statue on its feet and it falls over. So you know, he lost his mind because he was a powerful king. He didn't treat the Jews really badly, actually. He was quite kind towards them compared to some later ones who deported them and mistreated them and persecuted them. But, you know, Nebuchadnezzar had no humility because he thought he was at the top of the food chain. He thought he was above God. That's derangement. That's the wrong way around. Putting the man, the king, above God, the wrong power structure. This king will be corrupt. This king will have his own parochial interests. This king will be looking after number one on some level. He won't be a dispassionate and impartial judge. So you're always going to get that partisan stuff, that identity stuff, that fractured stuff when you follow human kings, unless it's the God who became the human king who came off his throne and washed the feet of his disciples. If we don't have that culture, if we don't have that ecology, we're back into Cain killing Abel. We're back into tribalism. We're back into identity politics. We're back into the leftists laughing and celebrating when Anne Widdecombe, a 78-year-old woman, was slaughtered in her own home.
Yeah, I get that. Society's really is a new law these days. Taylor, we're coming up to the end of the show. I know you come on late, mate, but would you like to do a bit of a wrap up about what you've been doing and where they can find you and stuff?
So my Rumble is the Raconteurs Report, and it's the same for my YouTube and my Twitter as well. I pretty much always upload at least once a day, either a video or a live stream, either or, sometimes both. And I mainly have been just doing stuff like showing, giving out information from different sources, different documentaries, from 7/7 to 9/11 to COVID to Q to World War II to pretty much everything. I yesterday finished up seeing the documentary called The Fall of the Cabal. Have you guys seen that one?
No, I've heard of it.
It's a good one. It's it's a bit of an older one and from like 2019, but it's still a really good one. Unfortunately, the maker of it is no longer around. It was a woman, and she quote unquote committed suicide. And I say quote unquote because whenever someone makes a documentary like that and they quote unquote commit suicide, you know that it's just suicide. You know that they were murdered.
What was it called, Taylor?
The fall of the Cabal.
Yes. Yeah, it's on Rumble. That you can still get that on Rumble, can't you?
Yeah, that's what I streamed yesterday. It's a good one. It's not perfect. I did have some issues with it, but that's fine. The overall message was right, especially toward the end when it started talking about the Q stuff as well. It really got into the child sex trafficking and the torture and the sacrificing of babies and all that. So, hopefully that stuff. I'm hoping that stuff comes out. I don't think we're gonna see frazzle drip shown on live television. I think that's a bit much, but hopefully at least the information will become public in a way that nobody can deny. So that way we cognitive dissonance. You know what I mean?
For me, it should all be made public, no matter what. It should all be made public. We need to know just how low humans can be, because this is a fallen world. It is in a fallen state. There's only one way out of it. That's the interesting thing. I wonder how many Jesuses we're going to start seeing.
Taylor, what would you like from your considered perspective? Now we know that you've given us the perspective about if you like the operation and how things are going and so on. But what would your personal summation be at this time, given the state of the world, as to what people should cling on to? Do you believe that they should still be clinging on to, as Jesse Lee Peterson calls Trump, the Great White Hope, or do you believe that we should be looking further afield?
Sorry, you're gonna have to repeat that because there was a loud ass from a car outside my house and some jackass. So
Yeah, so Jesse Lee Peterson described Donald Trump as the Great White Hope. Now, would you still be suggesting, from everything that we've heard from you down, recent months, perhaps the last, I don't know, 18 months or so, that the Q plan is everything under control and that people should just trust the plan? Or would you now recommend to people that they do need to look just beyond human figures in order to feel secure in this life? Should people be asking questions of their eternal soul, do you think, Taylor? Or do you think they can trust political processes and political saviors?
well, my answer would be why can't you? My counter question would be why can't you just do both?
Right.
I feel like that doing both is the best thing to do. You can trust them, you can trust the plan and the process, the military, Trump, and all that good stuff, while still looking for the spiritual stuff. Because at the end of the day, as many people have said, this is a spiritual war above anything else.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, do you think though that they might sometimes not align? In other words, that so most people think, well, God in heaven or whatever, however people conceive, is perfect, is steadfast, doesn't change. Ultimately, there'll be a justification, a vindication, a final battle that he will win. But of course, with the human actors, we also know that the enemy of God is the deceiver. So I mean, from your perspective, I mean, I'm asking this practically, not to try and set up any traps or anything. I've no interest in that. It's just like, well, how would you recommend that people discern properly that the human actors actually are good faith actors, and that trusting in them is the same as trusting in God, and not the opposite of trusting in God?
well, in order to do that, you have to do your own research. You have to there's a lot of people to look out for when it comes to analyzing the posts and Q proofs and all that good stuff, and then taking a look at the way the world's moved in the practically 10 years since the first Q post back in 2017. And it's not something that can be answered in just a few words. All I can say is that you have to do the work yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to be you're not going to understand it fully. I can I can point you in the right direction, but that all depends on if you want to look at it yourself. So
I'm just thinking here, Taylor, in terms of the balance between analysing all the research out there that you've done, and you've got your sources and your documents, and how we balance that with analysing, say, the scriptural sources, and how we if they appear to contradict each other or not quite align, for example, the importance of studying the Bible, which some people think is just a supernatural document or a book of old fables written by human beings, one or the other. They don't tend to think it's got application necessarily, or it's a bit woo-woo compared to concrete stuff, journalism, things that we see actually happening in the world. But ultimately, if you're going to keep them in tension, there's a dance going on between these different sources. Some of them are contemporary journalistic sources and doing research and digging, but others are studying other documents that are right under our noses. So what do you feel about that in terms of the Bible? I mean, do you read the Bible, Taylor?
I'm going to be honest with you. I actually have not. I really should, though. And I mean to get around to it. It's just a matter of I want to feel like I'm ready for it. That's the thing. I don't feel like I'm in that position yet to do it in a way where I'll fully understand it. Plus, it's a lot of commitment. That's a big commitment to do that, especially considering everything that goes with it. It's not just simply picking up a book, reading it, and coming out of it. I got everything I needed.
Yeah, you're muffling your mic, Taylor.
Yeah, it's so that's why that's why I haven't done it yet. I want to make sure that I'm in the right position to do that. So
The thing is, it might be the most important thing that you don't know that's in your life, mate.
Possibly.
If it's true, Taylor, you're running out of time. So start having a flick, put some on audio, listen to it.
One of the key things that Jesus said, it's quite famous. What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world but lose his own soul? I mean, what a brilliant line. What an absolutely outstanding line that is. I mean, you can't top that, can you? What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world but loses his own soul? And that sums it up, I think.
Well, there's a video here, Alex, that we'll finish off with. This is an atheist lawyer was given a challenge, and he said, "This." Well, I'll let the fellow tell the story rather than me.
There was a guy named Sir Lionel Luckhoo. Sir Lionel is the most successful defense attorney in the world. He was in the Guinness Book of World Records. Why? Because he won 245 murder trials in a row.
This guy right here?
That's him.
Okay.
245 murder trials in a row. Nobody's ever done that as a defense attorney, either before the jury or on appeal. Okay. And when I was a student at Yale Law School, he was my hero because I figured this guy must understand evidence.
He's an atheist.
He was a skeptic about the resurrection. He didn't believe the resurrection occurred. And I was an atheist, so I agreed with him. And he was knighted twice by Queen Elizabeth. He became a member of the Supreme Court of his country. Yeah. So brilliant guy. But he didn't believe in the resurrection. So somebody came to him one day and said, Sir Lionel, you're the greatest lawyer in the world. Have you ever taken your monumental legal skill and applied it to the historical record of the resurrection and come to an informed verdict on whether Jesus rose from the dead? He said, no, I haven't, but I will. So he spent years doing what I ended up doing, investigating the evidence. And I'll recite to you one sentence he wrote that summarized his conclusion. He says, I say unequivocally that the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ is so overwhelming that it compels acceptance by proof, which leaves absolutely no room for doubt. This from the greatest legal mind, I think, in practical sense. There was a guy named...
So what can you say to that? That's a non-believer who's come to a conclusion that based on the evidence, because of the eyewitnesses, because of the testimonies, because of all the evidence that pointed to this extra supernatural thing from atheism to believers all across the board. That's why it's so important, Taylor, because there's something really different about those scriptures. It's not about a religion, Taylor. Don't go to a religion and expect them to tell you the truth. That's why it's important that if and when you read it, you go straight to the scripture and read it for yourself, get an understanding for yourself, because there's so much lies out there that is plausible. All it needs to be is so subtle. So, when we see evidence like that, where there's so much evidence that there's not a reasonable doubt. We can always pick holes in things, but there's something really pertinent that Jesus says, because all the religions will say Jesus is one of the ways, but Jesus says, I'm the only way. All the religions say that's not true, and Jesus went, okay. So put it on and listen to it, mate, while you're doing something else.
Mark's Gospel. It's only 16 chapters long.
When you said Marx for a second, I thought you meant Karl Marx. I was about to say, wait,
no,
what?
No.
Yeah, not Karl Marx's Gospel.
No,
No.
Definitely not him. No, the Gospel of Mark. 16 chapters telling you on his journey. What I would say is when you're exposed to the words and actions of Jesus Christ, it's like it's a soul level encounter. It's just different than anything else you'll experience, and you just suck it and see, give it a go, see what stirs within you. Because if you've not read it, you've no chance of being exposed to that truth. It's incredible.
And we'd love to hear your questions, because you will be analytical about it, and that's what we want.
All right, fair enough. I'll see what I can do.
Thanks for turning up. Hope you can come a bit earlier next week, Taylor.
I'll do what I can.
No worries, my friend.
Keep up the good work, Taylor.
Yep, appreciate that. And appreciate you guys having me on as usual.
No worries, man. God bless.
Yep, God bless.
In closing then, sir.
Well, I can't talk about ecology again, can I? But I'm rather obsessed with it at the moment because I think it's definitive. So, but let's remember the state of play that we've got to. And like I said, I was absolutely amazed that, you know, the news broke 3 days ago now that 68-year-old Anne Widdecombe had been slaughtered in her own house with blunt force trauma to her head, and so they stoved her skull in. And I find that it's chilling, and the fact that the police are insisting that there is no reason to suspect a political motive. Anybody who's not got a deranged ecology should immediately be able to hear that police lie, blatant lie, for what it is. There's every reason to suspect a political motive, every reason to expect it. So you see what liars do. They lie openly to your face. That's a deranged ecology. And it's the same also with the judiciary. The whole system at that level is rotten.
Yeah.
And it will underwrite and support and make excuses for the murder of human souls. And, you know, and then other people, yes, will cheer from the sidelines and say it's a good thing. We're in trouble.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to use the word ecology again, except I just used it. That level of derangement is making people profoundly ill, profoundly distorted, and we should be very worried by it. And it will be swept under the carpet, and people will just move on, and it'll be the chip paper, won't it, of yesterday's headline in short order. Don't forget, because just because you're not a political activist, if you're out there listening, you think, oh, it's not coming to me. You know, that poor woman was a targeted assassination, simple as that. And just don't think that because you think you're leading a non-public life that this kind of thing ain't coming for you, because it is.
So I can't disagree with any of that point, Alex. We are living in very dangerous times that I've not seen in my life, times that we've been warned about. Are we going to be able to wake up from this apathy? Do we want to wake up? Do we want to stay in the matrix? We're going to find out, because when I look out now, I can see the wheat and the tares are being separated. Thanks to everybody who stayed with us in the chat, and thank you to everybody who watches on Catch Up. Please like and share and get the show out and get people asking questions about this stuff, because it's pertinent. There's only one way out of it. Nat, God bless, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Welcome to the report. On this day of July, where the masses swallow knowledge that they never even try to prove or to test, they just inherit and repeat from a textbook, a headline, or a voice upon the street. They mistake their confidence for truth, but it's a strong delusion spell. It has charts, degrees, consensus, and a crowd to mock you well. Good evening, Alex. How are you doing out there? Unmute your microphone and step into the square. If you look at the Swifties, it's glamorous and bright. You're visible, you're recognized, you're centered in the light. Or you're hanging with the New Agers, banging on the drum, sitting in a gong bath till the false sensations come, singing Kumbaya, generating an intense, immediate thrill. But a feeling isn't doctrine, and it cannot cure the ill. True allegiance isn't built on a manufactured spark. It took 3 years of walking with the master through the dark. The system rhythm is evil, pass it up and